Hey guys, well, let's begin. Tonight we slip into a world without comfort, without relief, without pause. You're a woman in medieval Europe, and your day begins well before sunrise. The air is damp, the thatch roof drips dew into your straw bedding, and your muscles already ache from yesterday. You blink in the half-dark, scratch at a flea bite on your ankle, and you know before you even stand up. Outside, the village stirs in its grim rhythm. You smell smoke from a nearby hearth. Someone's already baking rye bread that will taste like dust and stone. Your shift, the only one you own, clings damp to your skin. There's no closet to choose from, no clean socks, no soap, just scratchy wool and layers of dirt you've stopped trying to scrub off. To be honest, you probably won't survive this. Not just the month or the year, we're talking life in general. Between childbirth, disease, famine, and boredom so thick it suffocates, the odds are stacked against you like rotten firewood. So before the lights go out, click like and subscribe, but only if you're brave enough to return tomorrow night. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. We want to know what corner of the world you're barely surviving bedtime in. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan, because silence makes this story worse. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the uneven floor, dodging a rat in the shadows. Your mother's already at the door, whispering prayers while rubbing dried rosemary on her sleeves. It's not for religion, it's to hide the stink. Your father doesn't look at you. He rarely does. Girls are born wrong, everyone knows. Too soft, too weepy, too cursed. There's work to do. Always. You head to the well, shoulders hunched against the early wind, balancing a clay jug that's chipped and cold. One wrong step on the muddy path and you'll have to start again. Hauling water is your morning warm-up act, before you sweep the hearth, milk the goat, and scrub the floor with your hands. No mop, just straw and knees. Historians still argue whether women like you were truly considered human under the law. Technically, you're a person, but your husband owns your body, your father owns your marriage, and God? God owns your soul, but only if you behave. Even saints don't get a break. Your daily diet is imaginative. Bread, if the grain was good that season. Maybe onions. The occasional surprise maggot. If you're lucky, a spoon of watery stew with cabbage and some mystery meat. Possibly rabbit, possibly rat. No one asks. Your fingers stay chapped, swollen from cold and nicked from weaving, grinding, scrubbing. You try to ignore the sharp ache under your ribs. Probably another round of stomach worms. That's just life. No medicine, unless you count praying or chewing on crushed fennel seeds. Honestly, those fennel seeds do more for your breath than your guts. Even fun is exhausting. During festivals, you're expected to dance until your ankles scream, wear garlands that itch, and smile at older men who compliment your fertility. Yea? You hear a whisper about a woman in the next village, burned because she spoke during Mass. Or was it because she owned a cat? The details blur, but the message sticks. Don't stand out. Don't speak up. Don't even hum a tune too loudly. You do your chores, thank the saints, and keep your eyes down. There's a weird comfort in routine. Stir the pot, slap the dough, braid your sister's lice-infested hair. You talk in whispers about the sun looking tired today, as if it too wishes it could sleep forever. You laugh once, then stop. Too much joy looks suspicious. By midday, you've already been on your feet for 8 hours. You help repair a fence, chase a runaway chicken, dodge a lecherous look from the baker's son. He's missing 3 teeth but thinks he's God's gift. You roll your eyes and keep walking. Slowly. With purpose. Because if you're caught being idle, someone will make up a job for you. Evenings don't mean rest. You're spinning wool by candlelight, the shadows playing tricks on your strained eyes. If you prick your finger, you just wipe the blood on your skirt and keep going. That skirt's seen worse. It's basically a medieval crime scene. As darkness folds in, the house gets colder. There's no insulation, just smoke and damp wood. You huddle with your siblings under a shared blanket that smells like every person who's ever used it. Your mother mumbles stories, some about saints, others about witches. Honestly, you can't tell the difference. Both end in screaming. You think about escape sometimes. Maybe you'll run away, join a convent, become a scribe. But you can't read, or write, or travel alone without being accused of something terrible. So you stay, like everyone else. Mainstream history often forgets your name, your voice, your body. But you were there, in every dusty village and crumbling stone keep. You stitched the banners, raised the children, whispered gossip, and died too young. Always, always too young. The candle flickers. Your eyelids droop. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. And again. If you don't remember your first steps, no one does. But they were probably toward a bucket, a broom, or a bundle of firewood. From the moment you can hold a spoon, you're expected to stir something. If you can lift a goose, you're old enough to pluck it. Childhood, in any modern sense, doesn't exist here. There are no toys, no storybooks, and definitely no meat. From cradle to casket, you're prepared for two things: obedience and survival. You learn to say yes before you understand what it means. You learn to curtsy before your knees stop bruising. And, if you're lucky, someone might teach you a song, likely one about death, lost lovers, or washing clothes in icy rivers. Historians still argue whether medieval girls were truly seen as miniature adults or simply burdens to be offloaded. But what's not up for debate is this: the system doesn't wait. The moment you can carry a basket or mimic your mother's movements, you're on the assembly line of life. You watch your older sister get betrothed at 12. The man is older than your father. He smells like cheese and has a lazy eye that never quite lands where it should. She cries quietly every night until her wedding. After that, she stops crying out loud. That silence, it teaches you more than any priest ever could. By the time you're 10, you've already had your future mapped out. Your mother checks your hips like she's gauging horse stock. Your father jokes about dowries, even though there's nothing to offer except a threadbare blanket and the promise of a fertile womb. Love, please, that's for songs, and even those usually end in poisoning. You're not allowed to be angry, or loud, or curious. Curiosity gets you accused of all kinds of things, witchcraft mostly, or promiscuity, or being difficult, which in medieval terms is roughly equivalent to asking for the last slice of bread before your brother gets it. You try to find peace in patterns. Stir the pot clockwise, fold the linen thrice, always add salt last. These little rituals help anchor you when everything else feels like a storm waiting to collapse your world. A fringe belief passed around among the village girls is that if you spin thread during a full moon, you'll never marry. So naturally, you spin like mad. Your first bleeding catches you by surprise. There's no warning, no talk of becoming a woman, just a slow dampness spreading through your underdress. You think you're dying. Your mother slaps your hands away from the stain and tells you to clean it up. You use moss and an old cloth that smells like mouldy hay. Congratulations, you're now eligible for marriage, or at least for being watched more closely by every neighbour. You're also now officially a servant in your own home. You used to help with the chores, now they are yours. Your brothers get more food. Your brothers get to leave the house. Your brothers, if they're lucky, might one day join a guild or learn to read. You master the art of silent rage. Here's a quirky little tidbit. In some villages, girls weren't even allowed to laugh too loudly in public. It was seen as immodest. So you learn to smile with your lips shut, to giggle into your sleeve. A full belly laugh is something you only dare in the company of other girls, preferably while ankle-deep in freezing river water during laundry duty. You find moments of joy, though. A warm rock to sit on, the smell of summer hay, the one time a boy your age gives you a daisy chain instead of a dirty look. You press it into a prayer book, not because you're devout, but because it's the only place no one will look. Every year, you're told the same thing. Behave well now, so you can marry well later. The irony is that even if you do everything perfectly, your future is still decided by someone else. The bar is so high, it's somewhere above the church spire. One winter, the miller's daughter falls ill and dies. She was 13. Her mother keens so loud it echoes across the frozen fields. You're told to stay away from the house. Bad spirits, they say. But deep down you know the real reason is fear. If it happened to her, it could happen to anyone. You clutch your rosary like it's armor, not because it makes you feel safe, but because it makes others think you're safe. Holiness is protection. At least, that's what you hope. You've seen what happens to girls who step outside the lines. They disappear. Or worse, they don't disappear, and everyone whispers anyway. Your world is small. A few rooms, a stretch of dirt path, a patch of field, a single window that sticks in the summer. You dream of castles, though not because you think life is better there, just cleaner. Fewer rats, maybe. Less coughing, more bread. There's one nun in the nearby convent who teaches you how to read a few Latin words. You're not supposed to tell anyone. If your father finds out, he might say she's filling your head with dangerous thoughts. But you cling to those words like spells. They don't mean much to you yet, but they feel powerful, like a secret map to a better place. Every day blurs into the next. The sun rises, the chores begin, someone coughs blood, and no one speaks of it. Your hands are always busy, your feet always sore, your back always stiff, and your mind? It floats above your body, cataloguing the 1,000 things you must not say, must not do, must not dream. You know this. You are not yours. You are the property of the people around you, the expectations above you, and the fear within you. But still, you survive. One hard, silent, weary day at a time. It starts as a dull ache in your lower belly. You're used to pain, splinters, burns from the hearth, the soreness in your shoulders that never quite fades. But this is different. It comes in waves, pulling tight like a rope wound around your spine. And then the blood arrives. Again. You're not shocked. This has happened before. It will happen again. But you dread it. Always. There's no privacy, no rest. You grab the same scratchy cloth you used last month, still stiff from the last rinse in cold water. You fold it carefully, stuff it between your legs, and tie it in place with a thin piece of linen cord. If it shifts during the day, and it always does, you'll leak. Everyone will. Menstruation is something no one speaks of unless it's in whispers or scowls. You're considered unclean during these days, unable to cook for others, discouraged from touching holy relics, and conveniently blamed if the butter doesn't churn. Even cows that stop giving milk, that might be your fault. Because of your body. Some fringe healers offer remedies, steeping you in sage water, having you sit over burning rosemary. One local midwife suggests placing a toad in a small linen sack and wearing it near your womb to pull out the excess blood. You're not sure what's worse, the idea, or historians still argue whether any part of this ritual treatment was rooted in real medical intention, or just old wives' desperation masked as mysticism. Either way, it doesn't help. You still wake up each night with clots between your thighs and a gnawing cramp in your gut. On your worst days, the pain leaves you curled up in a straw corner behind the hearth. You press a warm rock against your abdomen, hoping the heat will soothe it. Your sister tries to distract you with gossip. Someone saw the Lord's daughter sneaking out of the chapel with the falconer. Scandalous. You laugh, then wince. Laughing hurts. Sometimes, in the middle of it all, the local priest gives a sermon about Eve's sin and how all women bleed as punishment. You sit in the back, legs pressed together, afraid that your blood might soak through and stain the pew. There's a girl 3 years younger than you whose flow was so heavy last month she fainted while sweeping. No one offered her help. They just whispered about demons. You start to notice how closely your monthly cycle is tied to fear. If it comes late, your heart races. If it comes early, you pray it's not a sign of something wrong inside. A missed cycle can mean pregnancy, or worse, the kind of sickness that gets you dragged to the river for a test involving cold water and rope. And it's not just the bleeding. It's the headaches, the dizziness, the overwhelming exhaustion that settles in your bones like winter frost. But no one cares if you're tired. There's barley to thresh, nettles to pick, and siblings to feed. You wrap your cloth tighter, mutter a prayer, and get back to work. One older woman tells you that in some parts of the world, women rest in red tents during their cycles. given time, food, and peace. It sounds like a dream. Here, if you're caught lying down too long, someone will assume you're lazy, or worse, possessed. You sometimes wonder if men know how bad it is. You doubt it. If they did, they'd have built chapels just for bleeding women. Instead, they build more barns and leave you with rags and superstition. The only benefit, if you can call it that, is that your family avoids you for a few days. The boys won't pull your hair. Your father won't bark orders as often. You become, for a fleeting moment, invisible. And in this world, invisibility can feel like freedom. You wish there was something, anything modern. Pads, hot water bottles, chocolate, a locked bathroom door. But there's just the cold rush of river water on your thighs as you wash yourself in the dark, squatting behind a tree. Just a prayer that the blood won't draw animals, just the silence of survival. One time, you overhear a midwife joke that if men bled every month, there'd be entire churches dedicated to it. Heated sanctuaries with meat pies and foot rubs. You smile at that, even though your stomach is cramping again. You pass an old herbalist in the woods who swears by mugwort tea. She tells you to chew fennel and wear a belt made of badger fur to balance your humans. You do it, not because you believe it, but because you want to believe something might help. A quirky detail. In some regions, they actually used leeches to try to balance a woman's cycle. Let that sink in, as if bleeding more would somehow calm your body down. You try not to imagine where the leech goes, or worse, how they remove it. The worst part of all this isn't the blood or the pain. It's the shame. You're trained to hide every trace of it. If someone sees your cloth drying in the sun, they'll look at you like you've cursed the land. So you hide it in the shade. You hide yourself. You survive the week. Just barely. By the end, your cloth is stained beyond recognition, your body feels hollow, and you're expected to smile like nothing happened. Because next week, you might be called to help a neighbor with her birth. And compared to that, this was just practice. You fall asleep that night curled on your side, knees drawn up, whispering to your own womb. You tell it to behave, to be quiet, to not betray you in front of others. And in return, it answers with another cramp. Your hair is brushed and braided. Not for beauty, though your mother tells you that keeping it neat might attract a husband with all his teeth, but for control. Strands must be hidden, covered, contained. You're almost 13, and your father's already talking about marriage. Your mother pretends to be surprised, but she's been preparing your linen dowry for months. Marriage isn't romantic here. It's a transaction, pure and simple. You don't get a say. You're not asked if you like him. You're not even told his name until after the agreement is made. You find out through whispers, or by the way your older brother suddenly stops teasing you and starts being weirdly polite. That's always a giveaway. You're traded like property, and often the trade is laughably unbalanced 2 goats and a worn ox for a living human being who can cook, clean, and bear children. Historians still argue whether medieval women had any legal recourse to reject an arranged marriage, but in practice, saying no wasn't just difficult, it was dangerous. Refuse the match, and your family could lose land, reputation, or worse, you might be labelled rebellious, and rebellious girls don't last long. The wedding day is less celebration, more sentencing. You're squeezed into your best dress, hair pinned down so tightly your scalp screams. You wear rosemary in your hair, a symbol of fidelity, and your hands shake as you walk down the dirt path toward a man you barely know. He's not cruel, not yet anyway, but he's older, smells of horses and sweat, and looks at you like a loaf of bread he just bought. There's hunger in his eyes, but not the kind you'd call flattering. The priest talks fast, your father grips your shoulder like a warning, and before you fully understand what's happening, you're someone's wife. In the days that follow, you move into his home. If you're lucky, it's a separate cottage. If not, it's the same cramped space he shares with his mother, 2 brothers, and 1 chicken that's oddly territorial. Your job is everything. Keep the fire going, cook, clean, mend, kneel when spoken to, nod when he grumbles, laugh at his jokes about your weight, even when they sting. Especially when they sting. There's a fringe belief in some areas that a new bride should sleep with a blessed stone under her mattress to ensure fertility. You do it because your mother slips it to you on your wedding night, whispering that it worked for her. It didn't work for your aunt, though. She had 10 stillbirths and now lives in a shed behind the butcher's shop, humming to herself and talking to birds. You try to please your husband, not because you love him, you don't, but because displeasing him is dangerous. He has the law, the church, the neighbours, and all of them will believe his word before yours. If he raises a hand, it's called discipline. If you raise yours, it's called rebellion. And rebellion, well, that invites punishment. Still, you find small ways to keep yourself sane. You make little patterns in the way you sweep the floor. You learn the exact spot in the hearth where bread bakes fastest. You sing when no one's listening, just 2 lines at a time, quiet enough to pretend it never happened if someone walks in. One day, you drop a pot. The sound is deafening in the small space. Your husband looks up, eyes narrowing. You brace yourself, but he just sighs, calls you clumsy, and walks out. That's a good day. On market days, you're allowed outside. Not alone, never alone, but beside him, carrying baskets while he argues over turnips. Sometimes you pass other girls your age, already swollen with their first pregnancy. You share glances, not quite smiles. They understand. You all do. You miss your sisters. Your old room, tiny and cold as it was. You miss knowing what to expect. Now, your world is shaped by someone else's moods, by weather, by hunger, and by the silent hope that this month you don't conceive. Not yet. Not when your body still feels like it's shrinking from the world. A quirky little titbit from a nearby village. The wives there wear their belts backward on Sundays to confuse the devil. You start doing it too, not out of superstition, but because it makes you feel like you have a secret, a silent protest, a tiny rebellion no one notices but you. You hear stories of women who escaped. One who ran off with a travelling actor, another who disguised herself as a boy and joined a monastery. But those are stories. You? You're here, sweating by the fire, kneading bread, counting days in your head and praying your husband doesn't want you tonight. The church talks about the sanctity of marriage, about your sacred duty to obey, to please, to bear children. But no one talks about the weight in your chest, the way your hands tremble some mornings, the way your voice disappears a little more each week. Historians debate whether medieval women formed emotional bonds with their husbands over time. Maybe some did. Maybe some found ways to fall into rhythm together, to smile across the table. But more often than not, it's just survival. A quiet agreement, don't make waves, and maybe he won't drown you. Your mother visits once, bringing a cloak she stitched from scraps. She says nothing about your pale face or the silence in your eyes. She just hands you a piece of dried apple and squeezes your hand. That's her way of saying, I know. You sleep with one eye open now, not in fear exactly, but in awareness, because in this life, awareness is your armour. It begins with a strange tug deep inside you, like something is shifting. You wake up before dawn, as usual, but this time you feel off, heavy, like your body has secrets it's about to spill. You try to ignore it, keep kneading the bread, sweeping the floor, but the pain comes sharp, low in your belly, blooming outward. You know what it means. You're pregnant. Maybe you guessed. Maybe you were in denial. But now it's real. Your hands shake as you spill the water bucket. No one notices. Or they pretend not to. Because once you're with child, you're no longer just a woman. You're a vessel. A walking cradle. A womb with legs. At first, people treat you kindly. There's curiosity, even celebration, so long as you smile through the nausea. Everyone asks if it's a boy. No one asks if you're all right. You nod, you smile, you try not to vomit when someone fries fish nearby. And inside, you wonder if you'll survive. Because childbirth here isn't a miracle. It's a gamble. Historians still argue whether maternal mortality rates were exaggerated in popular memory. The worst part? There's no way to prepare. No prenatal vitamins. No ultrasounds, no gentle birthing pools. Just you, a wooden bed, a few women muttering prayers, and a worn rope to bite down on. Your belly grows, your back aches. The baby kicks at night when you're trying to sleep. Sometimes you cry, quietly, into your blanket, not just from fear, but from the sheer weight of it all. The constant exhaustion, the knowledge that your body is not your own. Quirky tradition. In some villages, expectant mothers hang iron keys above their beds to ward off evil spirits. You do it too, though deep down you suspect the true evil isn't something keys can stop. And then the day comes. It doesn't arrive gently. The contractions slam into you like waves with no rhythm. You stagger, bent at the waist, clawing at the wall while your mother-in-law throws down hay to keep the floor from soaking up the blood. No one tells you it's going to feel like this, like your body is splitting apart. A midwife arrives. She smells like herbs and sweat and speaks softly, but with urgency. Her hands are quick, practiced, and covered in rings made of bone. You focus on the rings. It's the only thing keeping you from screaming. The birth takes hours, maybe a full day. Time stops meaning anything. Your throat goes raw from groaning. Someone wipes your face with a damp cloth. Someone else whispers a prayer to St. Margaret's, protector of childbirth. Your legs shake so badly that 2 women have to hold them down. The pain becomes your entire world. And then, finally, a cry. A small, wet cry that echoes in the space between your gasps. They place the baby on your chest. You try to smile. You try not to collapse. It's a girl. There's a beat, just long enough for you to notice the silence from the others. A girl. That means no inheritance, no dowry payout, no celebration. Someone clucks their tongue. Another mutters something about next time. But to you, she's perfect. Red and wrinkled and furious at being born, just like you were. The days after are a blur. Your body bleeds constantly. Your breasts ache and crack. The baby cries all night, and there's no one to help because you're the mother. Rest? That's for rich women. You're up hobbling across the room, sore for hip to heel, barely able to keep your head up. They call it churching when you're allowed to return to Mass after giving birth. But it's not a celebration, it's purification. As if birth made you dirty. You walk down the aisle clutching your shawl, legs still trembling, and kneel as the priest sprinkles holy water over you like you're something to be scrubbed clean. Fringe belief. Some think the soul enters the baby only after the first bath. Others say the first breath. You don't know when the soul arrives. You just hope it stays. Nursing is a full-time job. The baby latches wrong and your nipples crack open like old leather. You cry while she feeds, biting down on a stick so you don't wake the rest of the house. When your milk dries up one night, you panic. There's no formula, no backup, just boiled oats and desperate prayers. Your husband isn't cruel, but he's not helpful either. He pats your head, awkwardly, and tells you to be grateful it wasn't twins. You want to scream. Another woman in the village, Anna, died in childbirth last week. Her baby lived. They buried her with her apron still on, as if she might rise again and keep working. You think about her constantly. How thin she was. How alone. You learn quickly, childbirth doesn't end when the baby arrives. It leaves a mark. Your hips never quite realign. Your bladder leaks when you laugh. Your hair falls out in clumps. But no one talks about that. You're expected to bounce back, be fertile again by next spring. A walking miracle. A machine. Sometimes, when your baby is sleeping, you trace the soft curve of her cheek and whisper, "Don't be like me." You don't know what you mean exactly, just that you want her to have something more, less pain, maybe, a little softness in the sharpness of it all. But deep down, you know the world is sharpening her already. You smell yourself before you even open your eyes. That stale mix of sweat, smoke, milk and blood that clings to every thread of your dress, every strand of hair tucked beneath your veil. You want a bath. You always want a bath. But baths aren't daily things here. They're rare, seasonal, and complicated. Honestly, you've probably bathed fewer times than you can count on both hands. Clean, in your world, is a fantasy. The well water's too cold, the hearth water takes hours to heat, and even when you do manage to draw a shallow bath in a wooden tub, you're lucky if it's not shared with 3 other people, starting with your husband, ending with the toddler who eats beetles and pees in it. You do what you can. You scrub your face with damp cloths, rub lavender or mint into your sleeves to cover the scent. You chew parsley for your breath, even though your teeth are already loosening. Hygiene is an illusion you keep alive with plants and denial. There's this fringe belief going around your village that washing too often weakens the body, strips away your natural protection, so even if you beg for a full bath, someone will always say, "Be careful, you'll catch death that way." Historians still argue whether medieval people were truly as filthy as we imagine, or if our modern noses are just spoiled by hot showers and lemon-scented soaps. But one thing's certain, as a woman, you have fewer chances to bathe than a pig headed for a feast. And when you do, you're rushed, watched, and still expected to finish chores right after. There's a stream outside the village, barely wide enough for you to crouch in. On the rarest of rare days, maybe once every few months, you sneak away with a bar of soap made from animal fat and ashes. It smells terrible, but it's better than nothing. You strip quickly, washing under your arms, between your legs, scrubbing until your skin turns pink. You keep your eyes on the trees, always watching, because God forbid someone sees you naked. If it's a man, you'll be blamed. If it's a woman, she'll tell the others. You'll be accused of vanity, of being loose, of bathing just to tempt someone's husband. And so, even in the moment meant to clean you, shame clings like dirt. Your hair is another battle, long, thick, and impossible to wash properly. You keep it braided and hidden under linen. Letting it flow freely, that's for saints or sinners, and you're neither. At night, you try to comb out the lice, popping them between your fingernails. You use rosemary, elderflower, vinegar. One day you find a flea nestled behind your baby's ear. You pinch it off and whisper, "Sorry," as if the flea has feelings. That's what fatigue does. It makes you talk to bugs. The house smells constantly. Of meat left out too long, of damp cloth, of people. You open windows when you can, but mostly you try to stop noticing. Nose blindness is survival. Your clothes are stained, underlayers yellowed with sweat and blood, outer garments splattered with mud, soot, and the occasional mystery blotch you stopped asking questions about. Washing them means hauling water, scrubbing against a stone, hanging the garments out on lines, only for the chickens to poop on them before they're dry. The ironic part? You're expected to be fresh for your husband, as if you can smell like roses after a day of wrestling firewood and mashing barley with a baby strapped to your back. But the pressure is there. Men joke about women with clean smiles and dirty underarms. You smile anyway. What else can you do? You've heard of noble women who bathed once a week, who have attendants pour rose water into their baths and sprinkle powdered musk on their pillows. That kind of luxury is as distant as the moon. You're not bitter. Okay, maybe a little. But mostly, you just wonder what it must feel like to be clean without rushing. A quirky detail? Some women sew dried lavender into their headscarves to mask the scalp stench. You try it. It works. Sort of. But it also attracts bees. You learn that the hard way. There are public bathhouses in some towns, but they're expensive and often considered suspect. People say they're full of disease and sin. Some were even shut down when the plague rolled through. You've never seen one, only heard of them in overheard conversations, like dragons or fairies or happiness. Even church days offer no relief. You sit in pews shoulder to shoulder with bodies that smell just like yours, some worse. You try to focus on the hymns, the candlelight, the promise of salvation, but mostly you think about soap and privacy, and what it might feel like to fall asleep in clean sheets. Not that you've ever slept in clean sheets. Your mattress is straw stuffed into a sack. The sack hasn't been washed in years. You pick out dead bugs when you can. You fluff it before bed, hoping it won't poke you in the ribs tonight. You change your underlayers when you get a chance, but some nights you just collapse, fully dressed, and tell yourself tomorrow, maybe tomorrow. Your daughter crawls toward the hearth one morning, and you catch her just before she touches a glowing ember. In the struggle, you fall, scrape your palm, and land hard on your hip. You laugh, not because it's funny, but because it's all so absurd. You can't even have a near-death moment without smelling like soup in desperation. Still, you find strange pride in how much you endure, how much you withstand. Your body is a battlefield, and yet it walks. It feeds a child. It carries water. It survives. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's the closest thing you'll ever get to cleanliness, knowing you did everything with a body that never had a day off. And somehow, it still hasn't quit. The wimple itches. It always itches. No matter how you pin it or fold it or adjust it beneath your chin, it scratches your skin like dry hay. And yet, you wear it every day. Not because it's comfortable, not even close, but because it's required. Showing your hair? Scandalous. Indecent. Basically medieval streaking. You used to enjoy brushing your hair as a girl. It was long, thick, a little wild. But once you were married, that was over. It got hidden under layers of linen, wrapped and pinned like a secret. Now your hair is for your husband's eyes only, and even he barely notices any more. Historians still argue whether the strictness of female dress codes varied wildly from region to region, or if we've underestimated just how oppressive daily fashion could be. But one thing's clear, you're expected to dress properly, and properly often feels like punishment. You wear a kirtle most days, a long laced-up dress made of wool that gets heavier the more you sweat. There's an apron on top, a linen smock beneath, and layers upon layers even in the heat. And you'd better not forget the veil, or the wimple, or the girdle. Heaven forbid a breeze flips your hem and reveals your ankle. That alone could ruin your reputation. Your clothes don't fit quite right. They rarely do. They're hand-me-downs, mended so many times the thread holds more memory than strength. But they're yours, sort of. You share them with your sister, and sometimes your cousin, and once, during a festival, with a neighbour's daughter, who returned the kirtle with a suspicious berry stain on the sleeve. There's no concept of fashion as we know it. You don't get to express yourself with patterns or bold colours. You wear what you're given, and you're grateful. Or at least, you're supposed to be. Bright colours? Only if you're wealthy. Silk? Forget it. Fur? You'd have to marry a lord, and even then, you'd probably just be his third wife. Some noble women in castles get fancy gowns embroidered with gold thread and tiny pearls. You've seen them once, parading during a holy day procession. You remember thinking they looked like statues, beautiful, cold, and probably very uncomfortable. The fringe rumour is that some noble ladies sew charms into their sleeves to attract suitors. You try to imagine what it's like to wear a dress that doesn't scratch or sag or smell faintly of cabbage. The worst, though? Summer. Heat swells the air, but you still have to wrap up like it's November. You sweat through every layer, the wool clings to your back, and your veil feels like a wet rag pressed against your scalp. But modesty matters more than comfort. So you wear it all, even as your skin blisters, even as you faint in the fields. Your feet aren't spared either. You wear leather shoes if you're lucky, but most of the time it's just rough, homemade soles tied with strips of cloth. They wear out quickly, and once they do, it's back to bare feet, through mud, snow, and whatever your neighbour's pig left behind. Quirky little fact? Some women used to sprinkle dried mint in their shoes to keep the smell down. You tried it once. It worked for about a day, until the shoes got wet and you basically walked around smelling like soggy tea leaves. There's one winter you'll never forget. Your only outer cloak gets soaked in a rainstorm and freezes stiff overnight. You still wear it the next day, because there's no alternative. You can barely move your arms, you look like a wool-wrapped scarecrow, and you still have to go milk the goat. You get used to dressing in front of others. Privacy isn't a thing. Modesty is about how you're seen outside, not whether someone watches you peel off a damp smock in the corner of the house. Your baby grabs at your veil constantly, pulling, tugging, chewing. You don't even react anymore. And fashion for women? It's all about containment. You're meant to be covered, cinched, and hidden. Even your body shape is meant to disappear under heavy skirts and thick belts. Show too much, and you're a temptress. Show too little, and you're careless, sloppy. There is no winning, only surviving the judgment. You hear tales from travelling merchants about faraway lands where women wear robes like rivers and colours as loud as music. You envy them, not because you think it would be better, necessarily, but because they get to choose. You never do. Your husband once gave you a new girdle as a gift. It's stiff, made of woven leather, and smells like goat. But it's something. And the one time you wore it without tying it properly, an older woman in the village pulled you aside and hissed, "You want people thinking you're that kind of wife." You have no idea what that means, but you tie it tighter after that. There's a fringe belief that loose clothing lets in evil spirits, so everything is kept tight around your waists, your wrists, your neck. Sometimes you feel like you're being slowly squeezed into submission, like your clothing isn't just fabric, it's a leash. And yet, there are moments, just a few, when the wind hits right, and your veil lifts and the sun touches your face, and for a split second you remember what it felt like to run barefoot as a child, hair flying, dress torn, laughing with no one watching. You hold on to that, because under all the linen and wool and rules, you're still you. Somewhere. Your back hurts, always. It's a dull throb most days, an angry fire on the worst ones. But complaining isn't an option. There's no time to rest, no space to sit, no one else to pick up the slack. Whether you're 9 months pregnant, bleeding, feverish, or just so tired you can't tell if you're crying or sweating, none of it matters. Because the work never ends, even while you're dying. You start your day grinding grain between stones so rough they shred your knuckles. The flour you make is grey, filled with bits of grit that'll later wear down your teeth one bite at a time. You sweep, sew, cook, nurse, carry, patch, boil, pluck, twist, mend and feed, all before the sun even clears the treetops. Your husband works hard, sure, but when he's done ploughing or hauling he sits, drinks, talks, sleeps. You pick up whatever he drops, whatever the children need, whatever the fire demands. You are the glue, the invisible kind that never stops sticking to everything, even when it's falling apart. Historians still argue whether medieval women's labour was truly unseen, or if we just lost the records over time. But from where you stand, hunched at the hearth, your work isn't invisible. It's just expected, like breathing, or dying. Sometimes you dream of doing nothing, just standing still. You imagine what it might feel like to wake up and lie in bed, watching light creep through the cracks in the shutters without bolting up in a panic. But dreams are luxuries, and you don't own any. Laundry days are the worst. You drag a basket bigger than your torso down to the river, where the water bites and the wind slaps. You kneel in the mud, scrubbing cloth against stone until your hands go numb. Your daughter toddles nearby, chewing on a twig, covered in something unidentifiable. You rinse her off with one hand, while wringing out your husband's shirt with the other. There's a rumour that a noblewoman in a nearby manor has a maid who washes her linens. You picture it often. Someone else carrying the weight, someone else cracking their skin open on cold stone. Your body begins to betray you early. Your knees creak when you kneel to tend the fire. Your hips pop when you stand too fast. You have headaches from smoke, from hunger, from life. But there's no time to be sick, no one to cover for you. You just keep going, half a person, half a ghost. And even when you are sick, burning with fever, delirious, sweating through your only dress, you still get out of bed. You still peel onions. You still rock the baby while throwing up into a bucket. Because you have to. A quirky tidbit. In some villages, it was believed that if a woman stopped working after giving birth, her body would sour. You have no idea what that means, but it's probably why your neighbour was back baking bread 2 days after her third son. She passed out into the dough. They still ate it. Some days you wonder if you're lazy, simply for wanting rest. The guilt creeps in every time you sit down, as if a chorus of invisible voices chants, "She's doing nothing. She's wasting time." So you pick up the spindle again. Or you patch another sleeve. Or you boil another pot of weak soup. There's a pile of mending that never goes away. Clothes with holes in the knees, socks that barely hold shape, a cloak that's more patched than original cloth. You fix them all while your baby sleeps, needle between your teeth, candle flickering, fingers trembling. Your daughter coughs in the night, and you're up again. You press your ear to her chest, praying it's not the kind of cough that stays. You feed her a little honey, which you saved from last spring. You hold her close and hum a lullaby your mother used to sing to you, back when her hands still had strength. The fire goes out, and you curse under your breath, knowing you'll have to fetch more wood in the dark. You wrap a shawl around yourself and step into the cold. Your bare feet slap against the earth. You see your breath. You don't see your limits anymore. They blurred long ago. And when people talk about women's work, like it's soft or simple, you think of your cracked heels, your raw hands, the time you delivered a neighbour's baby while your own child screamed with fever on your hip, the time you stitched a wound with horsehair because it was all you had. You think of the aching silence after your stillborn daughter, how you bled for days and still had to prepare soup for the priest's visit, how no one said her name, how you whispered it anyway. You tell yourself it'll be easier next year, but next year always brings another burden, another mouth to feed, another broken spindle, another dead chicken, another long, aching day that starts before dawn and ends long after your bones have given up. You take pride in small victories, a loaf that rises just right, a clean corner of the floor, a moment when the baby's laugh breaks through the fog. You hold on to those things like lifelines. They remind you you're more than a machine, more than a shadow. But sometimes, lying there in the dark, with the weight of the day pressing down like a millstone, you wonder, what would happen if you just stopped? You never find out. You always get up. You're lying on your side, half asleep, when he reaches for you. There's no tenderness in the touch, no whispered name, no shared look, not even a question. Just expectation, just habit. This is how it goes. You close your eyes and try to leave your body, mentally at least. You imagine you're somewhere else, a meadow, a market, anywhere that isn't this sagging straw bed, this chill in the air, this weight pressing down on you. Sex, in your world, isn't yours. It belongs to your husband, to the church, to the idea of duty. You can't say no, not really. You can beg off if you're too ill to stand, maybe, but not in the mood isn't a phrase that exists for you. Your body is his right, his domain. Historians still argue whether medieval canon law protected women from forced intimacy within marriage. In theory, both spouses had marital debt obligations. In practice, though, you've seen what happens to women who refuse too often. Whispers, accusations, sometimes even exorcisms. Because what else could explain a woman who won't do her wifely duty, if not demons? The church has opinions. So many. You've heard the sermons. Sex is only for procreation, only within marriage, only in the dark, and only in the most joyless way possible. Anything outside that is sin, and sin means punishment, in this life or the next. There's a fringe belief that if a woman enjoys herself too much, her soul slips out through her mouth. You heard that from the baker's wife, who claimed she read it in a monk's letter. You don't know if it's true, but you've kept your lips shut ever since. You try not to cry afterward. It doesn't help. If he sees you, he just sighs and rolls away. If he doesn't, it doesn't matter. Either way, you clean yourself with a damp cloth as quickly and quietly as you can, and hope it's over for a few nights. And then there's the church's list of rules. Yes, there's an actual list of when you're allowed to be intimate. Not during Lent, not on Sundays, not on feast days, not while pregnant, not while menstruating, not 40 days after giving birth. But outside those times, you're expected to be available. Your body feels like public property, regulated, judged, whispered about. People speculate about your fertility, your frequency, even your enthusiasm. And if you ever speak up, you're the problem. A woman in the next village was beaten and exiled because she refused her husband. He said she had a cold nature. Others said she was cursed. You said nothing. Just tucked that story away into your growing pile of silent warnings. Sometimes you think about how different it must be for the men, how they get to decide when, how they get to go to confession afterward and feel better. You wonder if God hears both sides of the story. There's this one old tale, a bawdy little rhyme you once overheard a stable boy recite, about a woman who tricked her husband into thinking her body had a curse and that he'd be struck blind if he touched her again. It made you laugh, quietly, carefully, because even jokes can be dangerous. You wish you could joke more about the absurdity of it all, about how you have to close your eyes and count ceiling cracks while pretending you don't hate every second, about how your own pleasure isn't just ignored, it's taboo. There are days when your skin feels like a costume you didn't ask for, when even a kind touch from your daughter makes you flinch, when you scrub and still feel wrong. Not dirty exactly, just used, like a tool. And yet, you're expected to keep smiling, to bake the bread, to sew his shirt, to keep the fire burning, because that's what good wives do. Good wives don't complain. Good wives accept that they are vessels, mothers, servants, shadows. A quirky tidbit. In some monasteries, monks used to write elaborate manuals explaining why women must remain silent during sex. One line actually said, "Her mouth should be closed lest Satan fly in." You remember that one. You whispered it to your friend once during laundry. You both laughed until someone told you to quiet down. You wonder sometimes, what if it could be different? What if you had a say? What if intimacy was kind, mutual, something you wanted instead of endured? The thought makes your chest ache, because you know you'll never find out. Even on nights when your husband is gentle, when he kisses your forehead or brushes your hair back, there's still no conversation, no asking, just routine. He sees it as a gift. You see it as a chore. And if you get pregnant again, that's just confirmation you were blessed. Even if your body breaks more each time, even if your mind feels like it's unraveling thread by thread. You don't hate him. You've never even let yourself think that word. He's part of the system, just like you, raised in the same silence, taught the same rules. Maybe he's just surviving too. But still you wish, just once, he'd ask how you feel. Not about the house or the stew, but about this, about you. You lie awake long after he's asleep, staring at the wooden beams above. You count the knots in the wood like stars, and you wonder if somewhere, someone is lying awake just like you, a girl with the same aching, unheard heart. Maybe she's whispering to herself too. Maybe she's wishing for a world where her body is hers. You know the plants. Not from books, because books are out of reach, locked in churches or tucked into the satchels of monks who barely speak to women, but from generations of whispers. Your mother taught you. Her mother taught her. You know which leaves help with fevers, which roots ease cramps, which berries are safe, and which ones most definitely aren't. At first, it's a quiet pride, healing a child's rash with crushed marigold, soothing your sister's cough with thyme and honey, making a poultice for a swollen knee. But in time, that knowledge starts to feel heavier, riskier, because here, knowing too much might get you killed. There's a woman in the woods, Edith, though no one calls her by name anymore. People call her that old crow, or the witch by the marsh. She knows more than anyone about herbs, childbirth, healing. You've only seen her once, when she passed through the village market, hunched and silent, her fingers stained with sack. You've asked your mother about her. She just says, "Keep your knowledge quiet." That's all. A warning wrapped in a whisper. Historians still argue whether women accused of witchcraft were mostly healers, midwives, or simply unlucky. But here's what you know. If a cow dies after you touch it, if a child falls ill near your home, if a man dreams of you and wakes with guilt, you're at risk. You gather yarrow in secret. You dry it above the hearth when no one's around. You chew fennel seeds not just for digestion, but to keep yourself alert. It's a game of survival wrapped in secrecy. You help people, but not too openly. You whisper advice, but only to those you trust. And even then, you lie. You say, "Oh, I heard it from someone else." You say, "Maybe try this, but don't tell them I said so." You wrap healing in humility, because even kindness can get you burned. One girl, Alice, is caught leaving rosemary at a sick child's bed. The child dies 2 days later. The mother, grief-drunk, bitter, spits, "Witch." And just like that, Alice disappears. They say she ran. Others say they found her floating in the river, mouth stuffed with nettles. You never find out the truth. A quirky little fact. Some believed if a woman knew too many plant names by heart, she had to have learned them from the devil. That's right. Literacy was suspicious. Memory, even more so. You start pretending to forget things, just in case. Sometimes you dream of what it might be like to open a school for girls. A place where you could share what you know, out loud, in the daylight. You imagine shelves of dried herbs, bowls of water warmed by sun, not fire, quiet laughter, safety. But then the fire crackles too loudly, and you wake up. You have to be careful even during childbirth. If you calm a mother too quickly, if the baby slides out with ease, someone might call it unnatural. No woman births like that unless she's made a deal. So you learn to stage it. A little panic, a whispered prayer, some visible sweat, all to make the miracle look miserable. The hypocrisy is everywhere. They come to you in secret, beg for your help when the fever won't break or the baby won't turn. But later, they'll cross themselves when you pass, just in case. Even your husband gets nervous when you reach for your little stash of herbs. "Where did you learn that?" he asks once, eyes narrowing. You smile and say, "My mother." You don't mention the hours spent watching Edith from a distance, or the notebook you carved with a pin and soot hidden beneath your mattress. You tell yourself that helping people is worth the risk. That knowledge is survival. That someone needs to know what willow bark can do, what parsley seeds can stop, what mushrooms not to eat, and still your hands shake when you crush leaves into a salve. You know they could betray you in an instant. The church is watching too, always. Priests warn against female meddling in the natural order. You hear them preach that pain is holy, that suffering cleanses, that women who seek to dull the edge of childbirth are defying God's will. Defying God's will. You want to scream when they say that, but you stay quiet. You look down. You nod. There's a mother who comes to you with swollen feet and a baby that hasn't moved in days. You give her a warm tea and a prayer. She survives, barely, but the baby doesn't. She weeps in your arms. Later, her husband scowls at you across the market. You don't ask why. You already know. There's no winning. If you save someone, it's suspicious. If you fail, it's your fault. And if you do nothing, you're selfish, cold, not woman enough. So you walk the tightrope. You smile gently. You never contradict a priest, not even when he prescribes fish oil for the plague. You say, "Yes, Father," and then you go home and mix garlic and vinegar instead. Quietly, carefully. Sometimes, when you're alone, you whisper the names of your herbs like a poem. Mugwort, pennyroyal, chamomile, valerian, angelica. You say them slowly like a spell, not to summon anything dark, but to remember who you are. A woman with knowledge. A woman with care. A woman still alive despite everything. And in this world, that's nothing short of a miracle. It begins with a silence. Not the good kind, like when the baby finally sleeps, or the hen stops squawking. This is heavier. Strange. The birds don't chirp. The air feels still. Then the rumours come, creeping into your village on the backs of tired traders and breathless messengers. Whispers of death in distant cities. Whole families gone, skin blackening, priests running. The plague has arrived. At first, you don't believe it. You want to think it's just another story. like the wolf with glowing eyes or the baby born with a full set of teeth. But then the smith's apprentice collapses in the road. Within days, half his family is coughing up blood. They barricade their door, but by the end of the week the whole house is quiet. Too quiet. Your husband says it's God's punishment. Your neighbor blames the Jews. The priest says it's the wrath of heaven for women who wear their belts too high and laugh too much. Everyone's pointing fingers. No one's making sense. But you're boiling water, stuffing your windows with cloth, and burning rosemary over the hearth just in case. Historians still argue whether the Black Death spread primarily through rats or airborne droplets. Doesn't matter to you. All you know is that people are dying fast, and women are expected to clean up after them. You're told to care for the sick, because you're a woman, because you're used to pain, because you're good with herbs. But there's no time to feel honoured. The smell alone could kill you. You walk into houses where the air itself feels rotten. Skin blistered, eyes glassy. The dying cry out for water, for prayers, for mothers long buried. You wipe their faces with the same cloth you'll use again. You have no choice. There's a fringe belief in the next village that tying dried frog legs around your neck keeps the plague away. You try it. Why not? You've already rubbed vinegar in your armpits and burned all your sage. You'll do anything. But it doesn't stop. The deaths keep coming. 1, then 2, then 5, then 15. Coffins run out. So do gravediggers. One night, you help carry a body to a mass grave. You've never touched a dead man before. He's still warm. You throw up after, then go home and wash your hands with lye until they bleed. And here's the twist. People start blaming you. Not just you, but women, midwives, healers, anyone with a bit of knowledge and a basket of dried plants. You hear your name mentioned in a hushed voice behind the well. You stop wearing your herb pouch in public. You hide your fennel tea under the bed. One woman, young, sweet, barely 16, is dragged out of her house by a crowd. She'd made a tea for her mother's fever. The mother died. Now they say she poisoned her. You want to shout, to tell them it's madness. But your daughter's watching from the doorway, and you can't risk being next. The priest organizes a procession, says it will drive the sickness away. You're handed a candle and told to walk barefoot. The road is sharp, your feet bleed. The child beside you coughs and doesn't stop. By now, everything is ash and silence. The air tastes sour. Even the animals seem nervous. Dogs howl at night. Chickens won't lay. Your husband barely eats. He just stares at the wall. You care for a neighbour's children after their mother dies. You wash their faces, rock them to sleep, and lie when they ask when she's coming back. One of them starts coughing. You don't tell anyone. There's no help coming. The nobles lock their gates. The clergy retreat to monasteries. You hear that the Pope is sitting between two fires, convinced it'll keep the plague away. Must be nice, having enough wood to waste. A quirky detail? Some people think sweet smells will protect them, so they carry pomanders, little balls filled with spices, on cords around their necks. You try stuffing your nose with cloves. It helps for about 10 seconds, then you sneeze so hard you scare your baby. You keep moving. You scrub the floors, even though it doesn't matter. You boil broth for the feverish, even though it won't help. You say prayers until your throat is raw. You don't sleep. And then your husband gets sick. It starts with a headache, then a fever, then the swelling's huge black lumps under his arms between his legs. He moans, delirious. You dab his forehead with vinegar, rub lavender into his chest, light candles until you run out of wax. He dies the next morning. You don't cry right away. There's no time. You wrap his body in the blanket he hated, the one you stitched from old cloaks. You drag him to the edge of the village yourself. No one helps. No one even opens their doors. You burn his clothes. You scrub everything. And then, when the baby finally sleeps, you sit down in the middle of the floor and scream. Not loudly, just enough to let it out. Afterward, you get up. You have to. The animals still need feeding. The child needs holding. The bread still has to be made. The plague passes. Eventually, the silence starts to lift. People return to the market. The church bells ring again. But nothing is the same. The village feels smaller, older, tired, like the ground itself is grieving. You're called a widow now. Some offer pity, others avoid you. But you're still here. Still standing. Still carrying on. Because that's what women do. You stare at the parchment like it's a forbidden relic, which, to be fair, it kind of is. It's not even yours, just a scrap that blew across the path after a merchant's cart toppled in the wind. The letters curl and loop like little snakes. You don't know what it says, you just know it holds power. Reading, in your world, is not your business. Writing, even less so. Women aren't taught to read, unless you're a nun, and even then, only if your convent happens to have a generous donor or a lenient abbess. For most women, books are locked away, guarded, hoarded, meant for priests, scribes, and the kind of men who argue in Latin while women clean around their sandals. You once asked your father what a word meant. He told you not to be impertinent. Your brother asked the same question an hour later and was praised for being clever. That was the moment you learned. Knowledge isn't forbidden. It's just forbidden to you. Historians still argue whether literacy rates among medieval women were truly as low as the records suggest. But you don't need statistics. You live the truth every day. The only letters you know are the ones you've seen carved into tombstones. Even then, you recognize shapes, not sounds. There's a girl in the next village, her name's Mari, whose uncle was a scribe. She says he taught her to read by candlelight, using broken slates and leftover ink. One night, her mother caught her tracing a psalm. The slate was smashed. Mary didn't leave the house for weeks. They said she had a fever. You know better. In your house, the only reading material is the family prayer book, kept high on a shelf, covered in dust. No one really uses it, but it's there, as if simply owning a book makes you holy by default. There's a fringe belief that too much reading makes women infertile, or dangerous, or both. That letters get into your blood, infecting your womb. You once overheard a priest say that Eve's first sin wasn't just disobedience, it was wanting knowledge. That stuck with you. You wonder what they're so afraid of. Once, a traveller passed through the village and left behind a torn page of poetry. You still have it, folded under your mattress. You don't understand the words, but you love the way they look. Swirling, dreamy, mysterious. You trace them with your finger when no one's watching, pretending they mean something wonderful. Your daughter is starting to talk now. She points at things and asks, "What's that?" You name the items. Cup, spoon, fire, sky. But you can't show her letters. Not because they aren't around, painted in churches, carved into signs, but because you can't explain them. You can't pass on what you were never allowed to have. There's a convent 3 days' walk from here. You've heard whispers that the nuns there read every day, that they copy psalms in bright ink and sing verses from memory. You dream of sending your daughter there, just so she might learn a word, any word, even just her name. A quirky little fact? Some women who couldn't read invented symbols to track the moon cycles, to mark births, to count sheep. They used dots, slashes, tiny drawings, a secret language of survival carved into wood and stitched into hems. You've done the same. Small patterns in your embroidery that mean things only you understand. 1 stitch for sorrow, 1 stitch for strength, 1 stitch for silence. You've met men who couldn't read either, but their illiteracy is seen as unfortunate. Yours is seen as natural, expected, appropriate, even divine. God made women simple, one deacon once said, patting your head like you were a cat. He smiled, then went home and boiled your laundry in vinegar for twice as long, just to have something to scrub out the memory of his touch. There's a boy in the village who writes his name in the dirt to impress girls. It works. They laugh, toss their hair, pretend not to care. You watch from afar and feel something sharp twist in your belly. Not jealousy, just absence. like staring at a door you're never allowed to open. Sometimes you dream in letters, in lines of ink flowing across a page you can't read. You wake up feeling haunted, hungry, like your soul wants something it can't name. You hear that in some parts of Italy there are women poets, real ones, who write their own thoughts in their own voices. You don't know if it's true, but you hope it is. You hope somewhere out there a woman is writing about this, about you, about the hundreds of days spent scrubbing pots and biting your tongue, wishing you could speak out loud in more than just sighs. Your baby babbles beside you now, playing with a wooden spoon, smacking it against the dirt floor. You hum a song, low and soft. You don't know where it came from. Maybe your mother, maybe a traveller, maybe your own heart. It has no words, but it's yours. And for now, that's enough. You're used to hunger. Not the kind that grumbles politely mid-morning. No, your hunger has teeth. It chews at your ribs, sharpens your mood, fogs your thoughts until you forget what day it is. There are days when you look at a scrap of bread and think, this is it. This is all. Being poor as a medieval woman isn't just difficult. It's a layered misery, a daily exercise in creative survival. You're not just fighting to live. You're fighting not to be noticed while doing it. Because when you're poor and female, people assume you did something to deserve it. You live in a cottage so small you can touch both walls at once. The thatched roof leaks when it rains, which is often. The floor is dirt, literal dirt. You sweep it anyway, out of habit more than hope. There's a single window that lets in light and cold in equal measure. It's cracked, but you stuff it with rags. There's no pantry, no storage, just a shelf with onions and dried peas if you're lucky, salted fish on special days, milk only if the goat's been kind. You ration your meals like a soldier in battle, only instead of enemies, it's children, weather, and time. Historians still argue whether peasant diets were actually more natural and balanced than those of the wealthy. You'd like to invite those historians over for dinner, if they had anything to serve. Sure, the rich eat too much meat and drink bad wine, but at least they're eating. You'd take a greasy sausage over turnip soup for the 5th day running. You know where every berry bush is within a day's walk, which mushrooms are safe, which ones make you vomit, and which ones kill. The line between the three is thin. A gust of wind, a bruised cap, and suddenly your stomach is full for the last time. You beg sometimes. You hate it. But when the baby's crying and your husband's away working in someone else's field, you go to the market and hold out your hands. People avert their eyes. Toss a coin. Mutter about God's will. You don't feel holy, you feel hungry. A quirky little truth. Some women rub garlic on their skin to deter lice. It works, but it also makes people avoid you, which, honestly, can be useful when you don't want anyone noticing your dress has been patched so many times it's more repair than fabric. There's a hierarchy even among the poor. If your husband owns his plough, you're poor but proud. If he rents, you're poor and anxious. If you're a widow with no land, you're barely considered human. You've seen women evicted over a single missed tax, their belongings tossed in the mud. One of them now sleeps behind the chicken coop with a sack over her head to keep out the rain. Being poor means being watched. If your child gets sick, people wonder if you fed them enough. If your roof caves in, they ask if you prayed hard enough. Misfortune becomes your fault. Blessings always someone else's reward. One winter, a nobleman passes through your village. His horse wears a blanket finer than anything you've ever touched. You wonder what it's like to be warm all the time, to eat apples that aren't bruised, to not have to trade half your bread for a lump of lard. You once traded your mother's wedding brooch for a sack of barley. She never forgave you, but the baby needed food, and the brooch wasn't edible. You mend your clothes by firelight, reusing thread pulled from older, worse garments. You get splinters in your fingers from wood that's too wet to burn and too valuable to throw away. You sleep beside the hearth because it's the only place that's not freezing. Your child curls against you, her feet always cold. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, you wonder how others see you. Do they pity you, blame you, or worse, do they not see you at all? You know your worth, not in coins, but in calluses, in how many mouths you feed, in how many nights you survive without breaking. There's a woman in the village, Maud, who was caught stealing bread. They tied her to a post and threw rotten vegetables. You brought her water when no one was looking. She whispered, "Thank you." Her breath smelt like dirt and shame. The church tells you to be grateful, that the poor are closest to heaven. You want to believe that, but you can't eat promises. You can't feed a child with scripture. Still, you keep going. You wrap your feet in old cloth. You whisper stories to your child to distract her from her empty belly. You find joy in ridiculous things, like catching a rat before it gets to your barley, like finding a second egg in the coop, like seeing your child laugh, even if it's just because the goat fell over again. You survive by weaving strength into the everyday. You don't have time for dreams, just mornings. And if the sun rises, you get up. Because even when you're poor, especially when you're poor, there's no other choice. They call you widow now, like it's your full name. You hear it at the well, from the baker's wife, whispered behind hands like it's both pity and prophecy. Widow. One word, wrapped around your whole identity like a shroud. Your husband's been gone for months, buried without ceremony, without a headstone, just a cross of dry twigs that blew away the week after the funeral. You remember every detail of his last breath, the way he tried to speak but only managed a low rattle. You held his hand anyway. And after, you sat in silence while they took his body away, your baby pressed to your hip like a reminder that life still wanted something from you. Now, you're on your own. Being a widow in the medieval world isn't simple. For some, it's the start of a quiet kind of freedom. No more answering to a husband, no more bending to his moods, no more nights spent biting your tongue and lying still. But that freedom comes with a heavy price. Vulnerability, scrutiny, fear. Historians still argue whether widows had more legal rights than married women, or simply exchanged one form of control for another. The answer depends on where you lived, what your husband left behind, and how many sons you bore. You've got a baby, a half-acre garden, and a cracked spinning wheel. Hardly an empire. The house is quiet now, too quiet. No one complains about the stew, no one fills the doorway trailing mud. But also, no one helps with the chopping wood, or fixing the roof, or keeping leering eyes away. You notice men looking at you differently now, not with affection, not even lust, with calculation. You're alone, which means you're a possibility. You could be remarried, reclaimed, replaced. Your autonomy isn't inspiring, it's suspicious. There's a man, Robert, a widower himself, who comes by with meat sometimes. A leg of lamb, a handful of salted fish. He leaves it near your door like an offering. He doesn't speak much, just nods. But you know what it means. This isn't charity, and you're not ready. You may never be. A fringe belief in your village says that widows are half ghosts, still tethered to their husbands through grief. That sleeping with one will bring bad luck, unless it's after she cries over his grave. You haven't cried since the funeral. You're too tired. Maybe that makes you cursed. Or maybe just numb. Your mother says you should remarry, that no woman can survive alone, that love isn't the point, security is. But you've tasted silence now, and even though it comes with cold nights and loneliness that clings like mist, it also comes with choice, tiny, fragile choice. You decide when to wake, when to sleep, when to scold the goat and when to sing to your daughter. You eat what you want, what little that is, and no one complains about the salt. There's a neighbour, Joan, who's been a widow for 10 years. No children, no land. She lives on the edge of the village and makes little charms out of bits of cloth and bone. People say she's strange. You say she's brilliant. She tells you once, quietly, that being alone is the first time she's ever felt real. You ask her how she manages. She smiles and says, "I became uninteresting." And that's the trick, isn't it? To be invisible. not too pretty, not too loud, not too independent. If you make yourself small enough, maybe no one will try to possess you again. But then winter comes, and the roof leaks, and the firewood runs low. And suddenly, being alone feels like being exposed, vulnerable. You sleep with a knife under your bed, not because you expect danger, but because you can't afford not to be ready for it. A quirky fact? In some places, widows were expected to wear only black for a full year, and if they remarried too soon, they were shamed in public, paraded, judged, as if grief comes with a schedule. You wear the same dress you always wore. It's grey. You start working in other people's homes, sewing, churning butter, mending socks with holes too big to bother. It's enough to get by, barely. Your hands crack from soap, your back aches from bending. But the coin lets you buy barley, salt, the occasional turnip. The worst part isn't the work. It's the way people talk around you, as if you've become contagious. Women look at you with a mix of fear and sympathy. Men look at you like a puzzle they might solve with a ring. And still, you get up, feed your child, muck out the chicken coop, stitch until your fingers go numb. You do what you must. But some nights, when the wind howls and your child sleeps curled against your chest, you whisper your husband's name into the dark. Just once. Just to see if it still feels like yours. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes, most times, you just want to belong to yourself. You step through the tall wooden gates just before dusk, your wool cloak heavy with dew, your shoes worn soft at the heel. The convent looms ahead, grey stone, weather-worn, quiet except for the bell tolling the evening prayers. The sound rolls over you like a tide. You close your eyes. For once, no one is calling your name. No baby crying, no husband shouting from the field, no neighbours whispering. Just stillness. It's unnerving at first, and then it's everything you've been craving. Inside, the convent smells of wax and old paper, bread, dried lavender. You breathe deeply and try not to cry. You're not here to cry. You're here because you had nowhere else to go, because being a widow in a crumbling cottage isn't safer than being cloistered behind stone walls, because poverty presses too close and rumours move too fast, because sometimes escape looks a lot like surrender. The nun at the gate doesn't ask much. She sees your child tucked against your side and raises an eyebrow, but she doesn't turn you away. She leads you to a small room, a cell they call it, though it feels more like a sanctuary. There's a cot, a stool, a basin of clean water. You look at the water longer than you should. It's clear, still. You could cry again. Historians still argue whether convent life gave medieval women liberation, or just another cage with better curtains. But you know this. Here, no man owns you. No one knocks on your door after dark, expecting. No one accuses you of knowing too much because you know the difference between sage and tansy. Here the walls listen but never speak. Your daughter stays with you for now. She toddles between the stones, babbles to the crucifix in the hallway, dips her fingers into every basin like they're wishing wells. The sisters smile. Some even giggle, though quickly suppress it. Joy is allowed, but it must be modest. At night, you whisper stories to your daughter. Not Bible stories, real ones. About girls who climb trees and escape wolves. About queens who win battles disguised as boys. You make them up as you go. She falls asleep before the endings, but you finish them in your head, just in case. You start helping in the garden. The soil is richer here, better tended, better blessed. Rows of cabbages, onions, leeks. You work beside Sister Agnes, who never speaks unless spoken to. She hums, though, old tunes that sound like rain on a chapel roof. You learn the rhythm quickly. Matins, lauds, prime. Hours of prayer, hours of labour, hours of stillness. There's a comfort in it, predictability. The world outside may burn, but inside, the day unfolds like a hymn. There's a fringe belief that convent walls absorb sin, that women who weep too loudly inside them risk staining the stone. You don't know if it's true, but you keep your tears quiet anyway. You find a book in the scriptorium, just sitting there, like it isn't forbidden. The letters swirl like river currents. You can't read them, but you trace each one with reverence. Sister Helena notices. She doesn't scold. She just offers a piece of chuckle and a scrap of parchment. You hold them like treasure. And so it begins. Letters, slow and shaky. A name, a word, a sentence. The nuns teach without teaching, guiding your hand, murmuring Latin like lullabies. Your fingers cramp, your eyes blur, but your mind drinks it in like sun. You've never felt this kind of hunger before? Not for food, but for knowledge. You devour it in quiet hours, in candlelit corners, in stolen glances at texts no one thinks you're ready for. You're ready. You've always been ready. And the best part? The sisters know. They nod when you ask questions. They pass you small texts wrapped in cloth. They don't need to say it aloud, but you feel it. You belong here. A quirky little truth. Some convents kept pet cats, not just for catching mice, but as spiritual companions. Yours does too. A mottled old Tom who naps beside the psalter and only seems to blink during prayer. Your daughter names him Soup. Life here isn't easy. The food is plain, the rules are strict. You wake in the dark, sleep in the cold, kneel until your knees go numb. But none of it feels cruel. It's hard, but fair. You are not punished for existing. You are allowed to grow. Not everyone understands. A merchant's wife who visits the chapel once whispers that you must have failed at marriage to end up here. You smile without smiling. Let her think what she wants. You'd rather be scrubbing floors in silence than smiling through clenched teeth in some man's house. Your daughter grows. She mimics the sisters, folds her hands in prayer, sings off-key during evening hymns. She asks what the letters in the Psalter mean. You tell her. You can. That alone feels like defiance. Like magic. You're not a nun, officially. You're a guest. A helper. But you wonder, sometimes, if they'd let you stay. If you took the vows. If you gave up the outside world entirely. Could you do it? Could you become sister instead of mistress or widow? You don't know yet. But for now, you breathe freely. You read. You plant seeds. You whisper your own name in the garden and feel the earth answer softly. You belong to no one. Not a man, not a household, not a whisper. Just you, and the slow walls, and the slow blooming of peace. The woman kneeling beside you at Vespers is barely more than a shadow. Thin, pale, wrapped in grey wool that hangs off her bones. You've seen her around the convent for weeks now, always silent, always praying. Today, though, she leans forward slightly, and you catch a glimpse of something red staining the bandage wrapped around her thigh. Later, you find out she's fasting again, on purpose. It's not unusual, not here, not in a world where pain equals purity. In fact, the holiest women you've ever met are also the sickest. They starve themselves, whip themselves, sleep on stone floors without blankets. They pray so hard their lips crack and bleed. Their bodies are shrines, worn, broken, punished, into devotion. Holiness through pain. That's the unspoken rule. Historians still argue whether these acts of self-mortification were sincere spiritual expression or forced displays of virtue in a world where women had no other outlet for power. Maybe both. You don't pretend to know. You just see what it costs. There's Sister Agnes, who refuses anything but bread and water during Lent. And Lent is 40 days. Her hands tremble when she prays, and her eyes flutter like a candle about to go out. But the other nuns nod in approval. She suffers for us, they whisper. You wonder who suffers for her. You hear about St. Margaret, who died while locked in a tiny room no bigger than a chicken coop. She lived in isolation, eating only once a week, reciting prayers from memory until her voice gave out. People come to her tomb now, hoping her pain will rub off like magic. You visit her shrine once. The smell of wax and incense is overwhelming. You kneel. You try to feel something, but mostly you feel guilt for not wanting to suffer more. There's a fringe belief that the holier the woman, the more she must bleed. That if your womb weeps, your soul must too. You've seen nuns wear belts of thorns, sleep in coffins, scrape their knees raw crawling to relics. They do it with joy, or maybe just practiced numbness. You start to notice how closely pain and praise are tied. The sister who limps from fasting is honoured. The one with open sores is asked to bless others. You, with your sturdy boots and steady gait, feel ordinary, maybe even unworthy. One nun tells you a story about Saint Christina the Astonishing. Yes, astonishing. They say she once flung herself into a furnace and emerged unharmed. Another time she crawled into a coffin to protest worldly temptation. The point, the nun says, is that her suffering made her special, sacred. You try crawling across the chapel floor once, just to see. The stones bite your knees. You make it halfway before you feel foolish and stuck. You wonder, is pain the only currency women are allowed to spend here? Is this the only way to be seen? Outside, the world treats women like property. Inside, it treats them like saints, if they suffer enough. You catch Sister Helena pressing a nail against her palm one day, hard enough to leave a crescent mark. She says she's praying. You say nothing. What would you say? Later, she weeps into your lap, confessing that she doesn't feel holy enough, that she dreams of food and sometimes even men, that she thinks her soul is cracked, and if she doesn't hurt herself, God will stop listening. You stroke her hair and whisper, "He's already listening." You don't know if it's true, but it sounds like something a holy woman would say. There's a moment during evening prayers where your daughter sneezes loudly, disrupting the solemn rhythm. You brace for scolding. Instead, Sister Marjorie chuckles, just once. A small crack in the silence. You hold on to it. Not all the women here suffer. Some live here. Sister Marjorie, for instance, tends the herb garden like it's her first love. She hums while planting, laughs with her teeth showing. She says she used to starve herself too, until she realized joy could be holy. She calls it a revelation. She calls you Bright One when she catches you smiling. You want to believe her. You want to believe holiness doesn't require bleeding. But then Sister Agnes collapses one morning. She hasn't eaten in 3 days. They lift her gently, carry her to her cell. You bring broth. She refuses it. She says, "I offer my hunger to God." You say, "God would prefer you alive." She smiles. "Maybe." You don't argue. You just leave the broth beside her bed and walk out before she can see your tears. There's a quirky little tale passed among the novices. If you say a prayer backward under a full moon, the Virgin Mary will appear and ask you why. No one's ever tried it, but you think about it often. What would you say? Why are we told pain is the only path? Why are broken women called saints and healthy ones called sinful? Why do we pray for mercy and punish ourselves anyway? Sometimes, in the dark, you lie awake and listen to your daughter's breathing. Soft, even, safe. You want her to grow strong, to eat when she's hungry, to laugh without flinching. You want her to know that her body is not a curse. You start sneaking extra bread to Sister Helena, just a crust, just enough. She knows. She doesn't speak of it, but her hands stop shaking after a week. You write in your book, "Pain may be proof of faith, but joy is proof of life." You close it carefully, hide it beneath your pillow. You're not a saint. You're not trying to be. You're just a woman with sore knees, a full heart, and a refusal to disappear. It begins with a look, just a glance across the garden wall, the faintest flicker of interest. You're weeding onions, sleeves rolled up, dirt under your nails, sweat gathering at the back of your neck, and when you glance up, he's watching you. Not rudely, not like so many others have, just watching. He's one of the lay brothers who delivers supplies to the convent twice a month, regular as the moon, taller than most, with a kindness in his face that makes you uneasy, not because it's dangerous, but because it isn't. You look away. You're not supposed to look back. Love, here, is complicated, forbidden, really, especially for you. You're not a nun, but you live by their rules. You pray with them, work with them, sleep behind their walls, and even beyond that, you're a woman, which means love, at least the kind you choose, has never really been yours. Historians still argue whether forbidden love among medieval women, widows, novices, nuns, was common or simply suppressed out of record. But you know the truth. You've seen the glances, the silences, the letters passed in loaves of bread. It's not rare, it's just hidden. The next time he visits, he brings extra apples, says they fell from the cart. You say nothing. But when you slice one open later, and it's not bruised at all, you smile. You begin to notice when he'll arrive, how his footsteps sound on the gravel, how he whistles under his breath, always the same tune. You find yourself humming it while hanging laundry. It's foolish. It's reckless. It's nice. You try to ignore it. Pour yourself into prayer, into teaching your daughter letters, into copying psalms until your fingers cramp. But your heart, it's treacherous. It races at the wrong times. It stumbles when he calls you by name. One day he leaves a folded scrap of parchment tucked under the basket of flour. You find it hours later. Your hands tremble as you open it. You look happy when you forget to frown. That's all it says. You hide the note under your mattress, then take it out, then hide it again. You tell no one. There's a fringe tale the older nuns whisper about a nun who once carved her lover's name into the underside of a pew. When she died, the wood wouldn't burn. They say it was a miracle, or a curse. Depends on who's telling the story. You think about that a lot, about how love might linger, even when voices fall silent. The third time he comes, he brings a feather, bright blue. From a jay, he says. Thought your daughter might like it. She does, but you like it more. It's harmless, you tell yourself. Just kindness. Just two tired people trying to stay warm in a cold world. But deep down, you know it's more. You start seeing him in your dreams. Nothing scandalous, just moments. Walking beside him, eating in silence, laughing without fear. You wake with a tightness in your chest. Not from shame, from longing. You've never been seen like this. Not owned, not claimed, not used. Just seen. A quirky little fact. In some convents, women used coded phrases when writing love letters. Instead of kiss, they'd say blessing. Instead of desire, they'd write light. You start copying psalms with double meanings. Tiny secret messages woven into scripture like embroidery. You don't give them to him, but you write them anyway. One day, while pulling weeds, you cut your palm on a shard of pottery buried in the dirt. Blood wells fast. He's there, too fast, and presses a cloth to it. You flinch, not from the pain, from the closeness. His hand lingers on yours, just for a second. He doesn't say a word. You don't need him to. You spend the night staring at the ceiling, hands still wrapped, heart loud in your chest. You consider telling the abbess. You imagine her face. Disappointment, pity, or worse, understanding. Because maybe she's been here too. You decide to keep it quiet. Just this once. Just for now. There's a rule, spoken and unspoken, that love must be earned through pain, that only saints deserve affection, that women like you must choose between purity and desire, holiness and happiness. But what if that's a lie? What if love is holy because it's kind? You see him one last time before winter. He brings salt and barley in 2 small pairs. He says, "Keep warm." You nod. Nothing more is said. He leaves. You watch him go. You don't know if he'll come back. But that night, you sleep differently. Not like a sinner, not like a saint, just like someone who, for a moment, felt alive. And that's enough. They sing about you in the tavern, but you wouldn't recognize yourself in the words. In the ballads, you're a maiden weeping by a window, or a temptress luring knights to their doom. You're either pure as snowfall, or wicked as hellfire, never both, never in between. And definitely never human. The stories told about women in your world aren't written by women. They're sung by bards with wine-stained mouths and muddy boots. They add details to spice things up. Long golden hair, heaving bosoms, a single tear sparkling like a gem. They don't care if you're real. They care if you sell. You once heard a minstrel sing of a woman who disguised herself as a knight to avenge her fallen lover. The audience laughed when she died, stabbed through the heart by her own sword. That's what happens when women try to be men, someone muttered into their ale. You were 12. Historians still argue whether these legends reflect actual female roles or merely fantasies crafted to enforce obedience. You don't need parchment to answer that. You live the gap every day, between what's sung and what's true. You never wept prettily by a window. You were outside hauling firewood. You never seduced a nobleman with your eyes. You were trying not to cough blood while mending a sleeve. You were never a heroine or a villain. You were just tired. The Virgin Mary appears in plenty of stories, of course, pale, perfect, holy, but no one sings of her bleeding after birth. No one mentions that she had to raise a child in a world that probably looked a lot like yours. Dusty, cruel, exhausting. Instead, she floats. She's worshipped, untouchable, unreachable. A fringe tale once told in your village says Mary never actually touched the ground, not once, not even as a child. She hovered slightly above the earth, always clean, always divine. You're not sure whether to laugh or cry at that. You hear of Eve too, of course. The other half of the story. The first sinner. The reason for all this pain. If you step out of line, you're an Eve. If you stay in it, you're a Mary. There's no third option. You try writing your own stories. Secretly. Quietly. You scratch them into scraps of parchment and tuck them behind the brick near your cot. Little fables, with women who aren't saints or sirens. Women who are clever, tired, angry, kind. Women who make mistakes. Women who survive. You write one about a girl who walks into the woods and never comes back. Not because she's lost, but because she chooses not to return. She builds a house of bark and bone, teaches the crows to sing, grows herbs that bloom only when no one's watching. She's feared, respected, free. You read it to your daughter one night. She claps. More, she whispers, and your heart feels like it might burst. A quirky little fact. In some villages, people believed ballads were spells. That if sung enough times, they shaped the world. You believe it, a little. You've seen how people start to treat a woman like the story they've heard, not the one she's told. Like Alice, the girl with the sharp tongue who refused 3 suitors. Now they call her the Ice Widow, even though she's never been married. Or Hilda, who helps deliver babies, but was once accused of being too helpful and nearly drowned in a duck pond for her trouble. You've learnt to smile softly, to speak less, to avoid becoming someone else's story. But sometimes, in the garden or by the fire, you let yourself imagine what your ballad would sound like. She stitched her wounds and planted seeds, sang lullabies and spilled no pleas. She bent, but never broke or bowed. She walked alone, but walked out proud. No heroes came to lift her high. She built her wings, she touched the sky. Not exactly tavern material, but it's yours. Your daughter starts making up her own tales, ones where girls ride dragons, fight off monsters with frying pans, and never cry unless they want to. She names one of her dolls Queen Toadface the Fierce. You applaud the creativity. You teach her to question the stories. What do you think happened after the ball? Why do you think she waited for him? What would you have done? She always has an answer. Sometimes it's better than yours. One evening, the convent hosts travellers, performers mostly, jugglers, singers, a harpist with missing teeth. They perform for the sisters, spinning tales of brave knights and noble ladies. You don't clap. You keep your hands folded, and when your daughter whispers, "Why doesn't the lady save herself?" you squeeze her hand. Later, you sneak her a parchment scrap and some charcoal. "Tell your story," you say. "Make it better." She draws a girl with a sword and a bird on her shoulder. The girl is smiling. You hang it by your bed. In the end, maybe you can't rewrite all the ballads. Maybe your story will never be sung in halls or carved into stone. But your daughter will know it. And maybe, just maybe, that's how the truth survives. You're kneeling in the garden, fingers deep in soil, when Sister Marjorie tells you the Queen is dead, just like that. Softly, as if it were local gossip, not the passing of a monarch. You pause. The cabbage plant in your hand drips earth onto your skirt. The sun is warm on your... "Which queen?" you ask. She shrugs. Does it matter? And maybe it doesn't. Because for every queen draped in ermine and jewels, there were thousands of women like you, whose power never came with a crown, whose victories were never sung, whose names were never inked in gold. But still, you existed, you resisted, you endured. Some women, though, broke through, just enough to leave a mark. Historians still argue whether women who gained power in the medieval world did so because they were exceptional, or because they were simply lucky enough to survive long enough to be noticed. You suspect it's a little of both. You remember hearing about Eleanor, Queen of England, mother of kings, speaker of 6 languages, rider of horses, writer of letters, and constant thorn in the side of powerful men. They locked her in a tower for years, and still she ruled through shadows. Then there's Matilda, the empress who nearly wore the crown herself, but was forced to flee through the snow, cloaked in white, invisible in a world that hated female power so much it undid coronations. And Hildegard, the abbess who saw visions and wrote music and told bishops to sit down when they tried to silence her. You read one of her hymns once. It felt like thunder disguised as melody. You cling to these names like lifelines, proof that women could lead, could be more than mothers, nuns, or cautionary tales. But the truth is, most of the time, power didn't look like a throne. It looked like a field that you refused to give up. It looked like keeping the land your dead husband left behind, despite your cousin's threats. It looked like hiding food in your skirt during famine and lying convincingly to protect a neighbour's child. It looked like telling the priest, "No, I didn't see her steal," even though you did, because you knew what they'd do to her if you told the truth. There's a widow 2 villages over who owns her own vineyard. They say she poisons the vines to keep her workers obedient. The truth? She pays them fairly and refuses to marry again. That alone makes her dangerous. There's a midwife in the town nearby who refused to leave when the plague returned. She stayed, delivered babies in masks made of stitched cloth soaked in rose water. She lost 3 fingers to infection. Still works. They call her the Bone Woman now. Half respect, half fear. You meet a travelling merchant once, yet a woman, who rides a mule and sells combs carved from ivory. She sleeps under the stars, drinks ale with monks, and laughs like thunder. You ask her how she does it. She just winks. Never let them catch you alone without a lie in your pocket. A quirky truth? In some coastal towns, women ran the harbours while their husbands sailed. Not just cooking and mending nets, but handling coin, writing contracts, even hiring guards. One such woman, they say, ran off a group of pirates with a pitchfork and a curse. You picture her sometimes, standing barefoot on the docks, wind in her hair, shouting in a language no one dared question. You wish you could have met her. Your daughter asks if women can be knights. You pause, say yes, then add, not often, then say yes again, louder. Because even if the stories were buried, you know they existed. Women who rode into battle disguised as men. Women who led sieges. Women who trained in secret with wooden swords. And then there are the quiet powers. The woman who remembered every birth, every death, and held the village's history in her mind like a sacred text. The abbess who fed the poor even when it meant going without. The nun who wrote letters to the Pope and never stopped, even when he didn't reply. The girl who ran away instead of marrying the blacksmith's son. Who faked her own death and lived in the woods for 6 years before returning, teeth bared, unbroken. They don't sing about those women, but you do. In whispers, in lullabies, in the rhythm of the bread you knead each morning, palm, fold, press, turn. You start teaching your daughter the names, not just saints and queens, but all of them. The real ones, the forgotten ones, the ones who never made it into the books but shaped your world just the same. You light candles for them. You wear their stories like armor. And when your daughter pretends she's a queen, she doesn't sit on a throne. She climbs the wall, eyes blazing, cloak flapping behind her, and shouts orders to the wind. You don't correct her. You just watch. And whisper, "Yes, my girl, rule your world." You feel it in your bones before anything else. The creak when you stand, the ache in your knees that never leaves, the stiffness in your back that makes even breathing feel like a chore. You're getting older, slowly, quietly, without fanfare. No one announces it. No one congratulates you. You just wake up one day and realize that your hands don't move the way they used to. Your daughter is taller than you now. She sings while she works. She still asks questions, though fewer than before. Sometimes she hugs you for no reason. Sometimes she walks past you without a word. You smile either way. There's no such thing as retirement. Not for you, not for any woman in this world. There's always something to do. A pot to stir, a fire to tend, a child to hush. Even if they're not your children. Even if your body is telling you, softly, insistently, to stop. Historians still argue whether older women in medieval villages were respected matriarchs or simply forgotten burdens. You suspect both are true, depending on who's doing the remembering. You've seen elderly women scolded like children. You've also seen them feared, especially the ones with cloudy eyes and sharp tongues. You're somewhere in between. People still come to you, for herbs, for stories, for quiet advice when things go wrong. They trust you. That's a kind of power, a quiet one, but it's real. There's a calm that comes with age. You stop needing to explain yourself, stop apologizing for taking up space. You still apologize out of habit, of course, but you catch yourself. Then you stop. Then you smile. You dream more now. Not just while sleeping, but while stirring soup or folding linen. Flashes of the past, soft-edged like faded embroidery. Your wedding day, your child's first laugh, the goat that kicked you in the shin. You laugh about it now. It doesn't even hurt anymore. Sometimes you cry for no reason. That's new. Not from sadness, really. More like a pressure letting out, like steam escaping from under a heavy lid. You sit with it. You don't rush it away. A quirky little truth. In some regions it was believed that if an older woman talked too much about the past, she could trap her soul in it. You talk anyway. Because your soul isn't trapped. It's braided through every moment you lived, every seed you planted, every bruise you survived. The other day, your daughter asked you if you were ever scared. You told her the truth. Yes, but I did it anyway. You light a candle every evening now. Not because the convent says to, not because it's a rule, just because you like the way the flame dances, because you remember those long nights of darkness when a single flicker meant you weren't alone. There's a bench by the chapel wall where the sun hits just right in the morning. You sit there sometimes, alone. No chores, no questions, just you and the warmth on your face. You press your hands to your knees and feel the tremble, and still, you smile. People have stopped looking through you. Now they look past you. You're invisible again, but in a different way. Not dismissed, just overlooked. It's not cruel. It's peaceful. You can move without being studied. You can be without being questioned. And yet, you're still shaping the world. Every word you speak to your daughter, every story you share with the novices, every lesson you don't realize you're teaching by just continuing to exist. You're not holy. You're not noble. You're not the kind of woman they write songs about. You're something better. You lasted. And now, as your bones hum with weariness, as the candle burns lower, as your daughter hums softly across the room, you feel it, that slow settling, that peace, that whisper in your chest that says, you did it, you made it. You close your eyes, and you let yourself rest. Now, the night stretches soft around you, the voice is quiet, the candle burns low. Your breath settles into a slower rhythm, each inhale a thread pulling you gently away from the past. You've walked a long road tonight, through sweat and silence, firelight and frost, through blood and laughter, through loss and love, and the kind of strength that doesn't shout but whispers, try again tomorrow. Let that strength carry you now into a gentler place. Imagine the feel of linen worn soft with age, the scent of crushed time in the folds. Picture the flicker of flame on old stone walls, the hush of wind against shuttered windows. You are safe here. No one needs anything from you right now. There are no chores, no cold water to haul, no footsteps behind you. Just quiet. You've been many things. A girl, a wife, a mother, a widow, a healer, a whisperer of stories. But now, you're simply still. Let your breath soften. Let your hands unclench. Let your thoughts drift, not in panic, not in planning, but like leaves floating down a quiet stream. You've done enough. You've endured enough. You are enough. Sleep is close now. You don't need to chase it. Just follow the rhythm of your heart, steady, strong, and finally at peace. The story ends here. Close your eyes. Drift deep. Sweet dreams.